At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Doug. What a pleasure.
Hey, I'm excited to have you on the show. So where are you residing?
Well, I live in the suburbs of Houston, halfway between League City, or between Galveston and Houston, in a little town called League City.
Okay, so you're what, about 10 hours away from me? So that's
Yeah,
great.
that's yeah.
Hey,
I love it down here.
Yeah, I find that it's really fascinating. Everybody has a journey, and I'd love for you to share with the audience your journey, because you've done some amazing things in your life, and somewhere along the line it has brought you to this point that you're really working with people and trying to help them in relationships and so forth. Could you share with the audience briefly your story and how you got to this point?
Sure, be happy to. I grew up in West Texas, San Angelo, as a matter of fact. I was the fifth of six children, and we lived kind of in the rural areas. And early on, after graduation from high school, I went to college, stayed there a year, and decided to join the Marine Corps. And I spent 2 years in the Marines, 13 months and 11 days of that in Vietnam. And after that, I came home, and about a year later, I got married. The tragic thing about that was I wanted to be the best dad and the best husband, but I didn't know how. And so the marriage failed after about 13 years. And 2 years later, Connie and I met, and we got married. We got married about 2 years after that. And before I knew it, the relationship began to go the same way as it was before. And although I'd been to counseling before, we decided that we needed to go. And that going the second time, going for a reason to change myself because what I was doing wasn't working, was a miracle. And the marriage began to heal and work well. I worked 30 years in the corporate world in telecommunications as an engineering and construction manager, and really enjoyed that work. I supervised almost 500 people when I moved down here to League City. So it was a big job, and I loved it. But after going to counseling, I decided that, you know what, it's something I might want to do. And I looked into it. It would take a lot of years of college and other kinds of preparation to be licensed. And anyway, I decided to go. And as I went, I just got more and more enthused. And I graduated in 1996 and worked part-time in my private practice and full-time in my job as an engineering and construction manager. And I've done this for almost the last 30 years now. So I really love it. I've enjoyed it. It's been an amazing ride. And although my wife would like for me to retire, I told her I'm going out feet first. I just love what I do, working with people, making a difference.
Yeah, my dad didn't retire until he was 87 years old. He was a university professor, and I think he kind of inbred that with all of his kids.
Yeah.
Life can get a little bit boring if you retire completely.
Yes, and I just can't see that right now.
Oh, amen to that. So, great story. You know, what's fascinating to me is how, some of these elements that come up in our lives can literally change our direction. And I find that fascinating. I want to talk to you a little bit about your counseling, because you said that with your first marriage, you also went to counseling. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I went with
so
the idea.
tell me the difference between the first experience you had with counseling and the second experience you had with counseling, and what made the difference for the second one to be so successful.
In the first experience that I had, I went with the attitude of who knows more about me than I know, and who can tell me what I need to be doing that I don't know already. So I was very resistant, and probably not a very good client because I just knew I had all the answers, and that was what was causing me all the trouble. And the second time that I went with the idea that if I don't change, I'm gonna be a wreck in relationships the rest of my life. And so it was a change of attitude. And a story I can tell you about as we were in couples counseling, if you'd like, that really made the difference.
And we'll get into that story in a bit. So the other question I have, and I've been to counseling too, and what I find is I've talked to others that oftentimes in counseling, as you go in, the counselor seems to lean towards one person as not as much at fault and the other person as more in fault. What's been your experience and how do you handle that as a counselor? And what do you suggest to people if they go into a counseling situation and one or the other one gets that feeling?
Oh, it's such an obvious thing that happens, Dr. Doug, and it happened to me. And in fact, I think my words were, "Why aren't we talking about her? She's got more faults than I do." And I just felt like that I was being singled out as the culprit, the problem, and that made me even more resistant because I knew dang well that I was the good guy here, and that's one of the things that really changed my life when I realized that I was fighting something that I didn't need to fight. It That's what made me think about going into counseling. And today, when I see that kind of resistance and I hear the same words that I spoke, why don't you talk to her? Why are you talking to me? Why don't you talk to him? And, you know, I think I have a problem sometimes because I want so much for so many. And when I see someone that's Jerry Clark, that's acting, like they know it all and like they don't need to change, it's easy for me to focus on that. And I admit that's a problem. And I'll tell, them if they say something about it. The thing I find is the person who's talking the most is the one that I concentrate on. Not fully, but I look for opportunity for change. I say I don't give advice, offer experiments. If you want to try something that I offer, great. If you don't, that's okay too. But it's too easy when someone is just blatantly angry or blatantly in denial to want to focus on that person because that's where the opportunity for change comes. And I, like so many counselors, I'm sure, get caught in that trap.
So do you find that in most cases it's just only one, or do you find that as you really focus on both people and have both people really do that introspective work, that makes a difference?
No, it's absolutely two people. I say when a couple is having a great marriage, that's because both are working on it. When the marriage is going awry, that means that both people are contributing to it. So by no means do I just focus on one person. I like, having two sides of the equation and hearing two voices and two perspectives makes it rich for change.
And you've written a book. Tell the
Yes,
audience a little
sir.
bit about your book.
All right. The book is Blind Spots in Relationships. What I don't know about myself. This book came into being because I sit in this office over and over again. I say the same things. And the idea to me came that rather than say these things from myself to one or two people, or maybe even a family, that the effects of some of these things that I have to offer have made some big differences in relationships and in teams. And so I wanted to get the word out as best I could so more people could hear some of the things that might change their lives and make things easier for them.
Well, and as you talk about relationships, teams, what about individuals and people who have those blind spots and so forth, maybe not be in a relationship and yet they're still struggling? Do you
Exactly.
find similar information there for them too?
No doubt. a lot of times it has to do with self-talk. And when someone is having a lot of negative self-talk, they tend to show up that way, which really hurts them in many ways, not only in relationships, but introspectively. When they're down on themselves, they're not the kind of person I think they want to be.
So what brought about your awareness? As you said, first time around, not so much. Second time around, something had to hit you mentally, emotionally, whatever it was, to say, you know what? I've got to really look at myself. What brought about that awareness for you? And what do you find as you're working with clients? What are the elements that bring about an awareness for most people that they need to work on themselves?
Admitting that I might be uh, at fault was one thing. Admitting that what I was doing wasn't working. What really changed me was Connie and I were in a couples group, and Dr. Doug, the women in that group did not like me at all. And they called me Mr. Perfect, Mr. Know-it-all, Mr. Right. And that didn't set well with me at all. And the beauty of that is those women, they really cared about me, but they were just honest. And they didn't have anything to lose by pointing out those things that I couldn't see in myself. And although I was angry with them at first, and I didn't show that I was angry. I listened to them, but they're the ones that really made a difference in me, because after we had about a 2-hour group, we'd go to dinner and they'd laugh and cut up with me, and we would have a great time. And it was those women who dared to be honest with me. They, in some cases, I thought they were brutally honest, but in a lot of cases, they were honest with compassion. And feedback is the key. To be able to hear the feedback and not resist it was really the key for me to change. And once I realized that I was controlling, it made a tremendous difference in my life.
Well, and as you say, it's the resistance part that is the big challenge. You can hear all of these things, but if you resist it, it doesn't do any good. So, you talk about blind spots, you talk about, other things. What are the habits? What are the blind spots in most people, and how do they come about? What's been your experience in that?
I think we grow up with blind spots. We learn things in our families of origin that maybe work there, but don't necessarily work out in the world. And so if I'm loud and boisterous, I might get away with that in my family, but I might push people away at work or in a relationship. If I'm controlling and don't know it, I create havoc. And I think so much of the issue, and it was a big issue for me, had to do with learning how to communicate and be effective in communication, and not be the one that was in charge, but be a good listener. And that really changed who I was and how I became more effective in relationships by listening to understand as opposed to listen to answer or talk.
So, what was your experience as a child that brought about this habit or blind spot, whatever you want to call it, of being controlling, of being strong-willed, of not being a good communicator? What was it in your childhood that brought that about?
Interesting question. Being the fifth of six kids, there was a lot of teasing in our family. And not, it was just, I don't think anybody was trying to be malicious. They were just, anything that I said or did wrong, I got teased about it. And shame became a big part of my life. I didn't want to be teased. As a young boy, I stuttered, and that really caused a lot of attention and teasing. And it made me feel insecure. Shame was a big monster for me. And the idea to me was if I was perfect, no one could spot any blemishes in me. But I worked to be perfect and not have any errors, and then I'd stumble and fall, and someone would say something, and I'd go back into the shame pit, and then struggle trying to get out of it again by trying to be perfect, which was an impossible task. But to learn to accept myself as I am, and know that there's a lot I don't know, and know that there's a lot of blunders I have made and probably will make, and accept those. It's just an acceptance of myself that I'm enough. And the people that are around me and in my life, they think I'm enough too. So I don't have to put up any false pretense. I don't have to dress a certain way or act a certain way. I can just be me, and that's enough. And that's such a peaceful experience now. In the Marine Corps, I learned, the word surrender never came up. In fact, that was a dirty word. But what I learned in relationships is I can surrender to win. When I cause the people around me to win, I win. And that was a great thing for me to learn, is that I didn't have to be right. Let me make you right and make you feel good about our conversation. And the closeness really began to occur.
So as you look at these limiting blind spots, these imprints that you had as a child, as you work with clients, what do you find? Do you find that there's a greater cause of implants from a particular situation? Whether is it from parents, is it from religion, is it from society, is it from school, is it from friends? Is there one that stands out a little bit more, or do you find that it's very individual and you really can't identify which one it is until you get into it?
One of the things that I've learned is we are all so different. We have different backgrounds, we have different parents, we have different school, we have different clothes, different food. And that's what I respect, is people's differences. Sometimes it's so easy to think that other people need to think the way I think, and that's just not the case. Whether it's religion or schooling or lack of religion or schooling, I don't think there's a cookie cutter way of dealing with people at all.
So what would you say to parents? Here's your experience with 6 kids in the family. I grew up in the same situation, only I was number 2. So I was probably the teaser rather than the being teased. But what would you suggest to parents as they are parenting? Because the bottom line is this starts in childhood, and parents can have an incredible influence either in a positive way or in a not so positive way relative to those imprints that children experience. How would you help parents to understand the influence and power they have in literally helping their child to avoid some of those situations and imprints, so that ultimately, as they grow older, they don't quite have all the challenges that some of us have experienced?
Great question. I really think the key to being successful in life has to do with self-confidence. And too many times I see situations where parents are pretty autocratic, like I was as a parent, which I totally regret. And finding fault is something that destroys confidence. And finding things, I call it catching kids doing things right, is the key. Now, that doesn't mean they get away with anything. Being balanced, catching them doing things right, and ensuring that they take care of business that needs to be taken care of. It's a real balance. And I think emotional maturity has a lot to do with this, Dr. Doug. If I'm in feeling emotionally mature, I can lead my kids. If I'm struggling financially at work or within any kind of problems, it's easy to take it out on the children. So it's important for me to be calm, cool, and collected when I'm dealing with children. Another thing I think is very important is spending time alone with each child. That's really causes them to feel special. because in a large family like mine and yours, it's easy to overlook some of the children that are not, problem children. But I think just being focused, being genuine, being real, using a lot of choices. You have a choice, you can do this or that. And if you don't do this, this is going to happen. And I hope you make a good choice. I think choices are another thing that really help young kids grow into mature adults.
Well, and as you talk about emotional maturity or emotional intelligence, and my experiences have been that emotional intelligence plays such a role in how you behave and how you react, and how do you help people to understand how important that emotional maturity or that emotional intelligence is, and how do they deal with in a situation where they're in work, it's frustrating, whatever, and they come home to their children, and yet they can be enough emotionally mature that they can be a level of the emotions that they don't allow the previous 8 to 10 hours to affect their relationship with their children or their spouse.
Yeah. I'll say it this way. When our anxiety goes up, our intellect goes down. And the more anxious we become, the less intellectual we are. And it's that high anxiety that causes us problems in a relationship because I wouldn't be in control of myself, and I would come home and want to take it out on safe targets. And that's the people that love me, sounds ridiculous, but that's kind of the way it happens. And what I have learned is I don't have a check engine light, but what I need to know is when my anxiety begins to rise, I need to do something to increase my intellect or lower my anxiety. The more intellectual I become, the less anxious. And so it's an interesting phenomenon to me. What I have learned is sometimes when I'm anxious, I operate out of my reptilian brain. That's the fight or flight. And I learn not to flee. So I turn to fighting. And what I learned about fighting is you win at all costs, whatever it is. And that's what I had to unlearn, that when my anxiety goes up and my intellect goes down, one of the things that I really found that's a key to change, it's a physiological phenomenon, that when I lower my eye level to the person I'm talking to, whether it's someone at work or someone at home, or someone in a team, it triggers me to subordinate myself. And rather being in the fight or flight mode, what happens is I began to get back in charge of myself because I'm not trying to win. Sometimes, even in my office, I ask people to sit on the floor. If someone's getting angry, I'll sit on the floor with them and ask them to sit down. And the thing, I wish I could have it recorded. Of course, it's all confidential. But when they lower their eye level to the person they're talking to, the amplitude of the voice begins to really go down. And the connection of the conversation begins to get calm and problem solving as opposed to conflictual and raising the problem as opposed to solving it. I love that when I talk to children, and I really encourage parents to do the same thing. When you're giving instructions, if you lower your eye level below them, you're speaking to them in a totally different way. Sometimes it's that reptilian brain, pick up that stuff, do this, do that, that kind of, it feels good to us and we think we're doing it right, but to them, they're not. It doesn't connect as well as when I lower my eye level and I say, what do you think I need you to do with this? Or, do you think I need you to take the backpack to your room? It's just a different kind of conversation and more effective.
Well, and as you use the word intelligence, I think it's important for the audience to say we're not talking IQ. We're talking emotional intelligence. And I love there's a number of different types of charts out there that show this level of emotional intelligence, all the way from joy and peace and happiness, all the way down to victimhood and all of that, and recognizing that anything below boredom You get, frustrated, anger, and it keeps going down. And in order to get up there, you need to at least get bored, and then beyond that, start to find interest and enjoyment, and so on and so forth. So, I just wanted to clarify that for the audience that as you're talking
Sure.
about intellect, we're talking emotional intellect.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. So, how do you? I'd love to hear your story because you have a story. One of the things that I'm always interested in is stories that you have had with clients that have made such a difference in their lives. But as we talked about that, you said that your personal story is probably the best example. So I'd like for you now to share your story that really what happened, what was your healing, and how did that occur? And you can go into a little more depth now.
Okay. I just think that it had so much to do with shame and control. And as a boy, we didn't have a lot, and going to school with kids that did have a lot, it was very difficult for me. And I think I erred so much in trying to be more than I was, and it was easy for kids to see through that. And as a result, they knew me better than I knew myself. And going into the military, it was a totally different environment, and I learned a lot, and I excelled in the military. I knew that I wanted to be a Marine, and I knew that I wanted to go to Vietnam, and so I worked hard at doing that, and because of my makeup and that the thought about being perfect, I was a spick and span Marine, and in fact, I graduated as a platoon honor man of my platoon of about 75 guys, and I continued to excel in the Marine Corps, and so the things I was doing there really worked. And getting out of there, I was ready to start a family and be a dad. And the hard part of that was I was so ill-equipped because I thought, being in control, winning at all costs was the way to do it. And, we had two boys, beautiful boys, and they're about 3 years apart. And I treated them like they were in boot camp, and I wanted them to be spick and span, and toilet room had to be straightened up, bed had to be made, even at a very young age. And all of that I thought was making them better people. But I do recall a time when I'd gone home for lunch, and my son was about maybe 4 years old, and I had gotten on to him about something, and he was sitting on the kitchen floor, had some little overalls on and some little red tennis shoes, and he was just leaning up against the wall saying, "I hate him. I hate him." And it didn't register on me then, Dr. Doug, what a monster I had been until later on in my life. And when my boys became teenagers was when, the problems really existed because, again, I was trying to be right and make them do everything according to Hoyle, have great grades, etc. And it was just too harsh. And that's when counseling made a total difference with me. That, gosh, I would ask them to go mow the yard, and they would just do a horrible job, and I would take the lawnmower away from them and go finish it. And it was just that kind of action that I was doing that really caused me the problems. And because I was so deep in these problems, that's when counseling made a difference. And it really resonated with me. And I heard a voice when I was in counseling after I'd been there about a year. It said, "Jerry, take care of my people and I'll take care of you." And that's when I started, really feeling the call to go into counseling. And it took a lot away from my family to go back to college. I had 60 graduate hours that I needed to accomplish, and all kinds of supervision hours. And so that kind of took a little bit away from my family, but it also built my family because I was just a better person. And going into counseling, this is where the reward has come. That I say I meet the neatest people in the world. Mean people don't come in here unless they're dragged. But for the most part, people come in that want something different. And it's not that I'm a healer of any kind. I can just hear things and see things that they can't hear and see. And being a fly on the wall and not being tied emotionally or through love with these people, I can offer them some things that make a difference. And it's really been rewarding to me. And about 12 years ago, or 13 years ago now, I started a group of veterans that there were, the statistics were that there were about 17 to 22 veterans taking their lives every day. And that was horrible for me to hear because of the pride I had in the military and the things that I felt about veterans. And so we began a veterans group at our church. And when we started, no one came. Very, very few people came. And we have met every Thursday evening for the last almost 13 years. In December, it'll be 13 years. There was a time during COVID that we had to meet on Zoom, but for the most part, we meet in person. And ironically, it doesn't sound right, but there are about 30 to 40 veterans attend our meeting every Thursday night. And it is the most amazing thing to see these veterans come together and feel comfortable because we understand each other as veterans. We understand what we've been through. Not everyone went to war, but everyone, served, and the support and love. Some people come to get help in that group, and some people come to help others. And it's a confidential group. People talk about things that you wouldn't think they'd talk about in a group that size. But it's those kind of rewarding things, Dr. Doug, that counseling and change in my life has made for me. And that's what inspires me to keep going, to lean forward and not look back. I don't want to have any more regrets. And so I'm just thankful that I have the health and opportunity to continue to do what I do because it's very peaceful for me.
Well, that's wonderful. How, as you talk about these blind spots, and they really are habits. I mean, ultimately what happens is, we develop habits. You develop the habit of being controlling, as you shared, and we all have developed different habits like that. And how do you help someone? What's some of the methodology that you use to help them break a habit that is not serving them well and develop a habit that will serve them and their family and their spouse and their relationships better?
I think the first thought is to help them recognize what they're doing that's not working for them. And sometimes that's very hard because we can all be so entrenched in what we think is right. And that's the first thing. And then to talk about things like what's going to happen if change doesn't happen. What's the future look like if these conditions continue to exist? And that again has to do with becoming smart, becoming wise about who you are and how you show up. And it just kind of morphs from there, depending on where they are, what they're saying, what they believe, and how changeable they are, how malleable they are. So it really kind of varies, but that's sort of the way it starts.
And then you talk about inversion therapy. What is that? And is that a way in which you help them to change
Sure.
these habits and develop new habits?
Yeah, it's doing the opposite of what our reactions have, tell us to do. I was talking to a lady week or so ago, and it had been about 5 months since she lost her husband. They'd been married over 40 years, and she had lost her husband, had to move from where they lived to here in the Houston area to be with her children so they could help take care of her. And as we talked, she kept saying, I'm lonely, sad, I'm miserable. I'm hurting. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And the more I heard her talk, the more I could see that her self-conversation was just keeping her in a rut. And we began to talk about what if you looked at some of the opportunities you have? What if you said, you know what, I'm tired of being sad and I'm going to work on being a little bit more uh, happy, finding joy somewhere. And we talked about where could you find joy, and she had grandchildren, and we talked about, you know, what it's like to continue to say these things that bring her down. And she began to smile and she said, you know, I've never thought about that. The normal thought is I'm in grief and I'm sad and I'm hurting. And she came back about a week later, kind of laughing. And she said, you know, it's made a lot of difference because I'm having a different self conversation. Inversion therapy to me has the opportunity for a person to do something the opposite of what they would normally do. If in relationships things start to heat up and I get mad as a reaction, what I can do is sit down and calm myself. It's just doing the opposite of what I normally react to with, and so it's just turning the situation upside down to see what else could be done as opposed to the normal reaction.
Well, and you know, one of the things I have found as I've interviewed so many people is this whole focus on as we become, as we become the person that we really are meant to be and who we really are, that our behavior then represents that. And so, you know, and then as you change your habits, if you're consciously saying good things and doing those types of things, you know, kind of the inversion therapy, ultimately, do you find that if they keep doing it consciously, that ultimately it becomes a part of who they are, and therefore it's no longer a conscious decision, but it's just a natural decision to be kind, to be loving, to be happy?
That's a great point. And it would be nice if it happened overnight,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. It takes some focus and repetition. I like the small steps, taking small steps along the way, that so that you're gaining ground, so that you're having wins in your life as you make these shifts. And you're right, the more that we say the good things about ourselves and accept the things that we mess up and but don't dwell on those, the easier it is to move forward and look for that peaceful joy that I think we're all looking for.
Well, you know, and I love the quote of "Be still," and then you can follow that with whatever you want. But this concept of stillness and being able to stop. I know that you talk a little bit about the power of writing, and that's certainly something that I find is a very common thing that counselors like and other coaches like to use in helping someone to learn to be still and learn to become more aware of who they are and what they're experiencing. Meditation. There are so many things. Which ones do you use, and is it mainly writing, or do you use a variety of things to help people to learn that stillness, that mindfulness, so that as those negative things come up, they're able to recognize what they are and let them pass so that they can be more positive and happy in their lives?
You know, a big factor I think is breathing, breath work. When we focus on our breathing, we can't think of anything else. Our breathing is so normal that it's like our heartbeat. We don't even know what's happening. But when we say, I'm gonna take, you know, breathe in 1, 2, 3, hold it, breathe out 1, 2, 3. When you're going through that mantra, you can't think of bills or the broken down car or the yard needs to be mowed or any kind of distraction or worries that you might have. And so it's very powerful. And there's so much work done with in breath work. And there are so many apps that you can use to help control your breath. But that really brings me to that peaceful place, because when I get anxious, heart's racing and my breathing is shallow and rapid. And to calm that down just really brings me to a calm state. The other thing that you mentioned is writing, and I think writing our story is very powerful because we don't realize how things in our past ricochet in our head, and we don't ever calm them down. We jump from this to that, and writing our story causes us to really get in touch with what our thinking is and how we react to that. One of the things that I found that is very beneficial is if someone's had a bad childhood or a problem with someone in their life, is to write them a letter and say the good, the bad, and the ugly of what that experience was. And I have found that, some people write a paragraph, some people write 20 pages. The more you write, the better this works. And then when they come in and they read the letter to this person, it is very cathartic, and it really brings out some things that and makes them, kind of puts them in concrete as opposed to making them a ricochet thought. And then to me, the miracle question or the miracle thing after they write that letter and after we go through it, I ask them to write a letter from that person to them, saying the things that they need to hear, not what they think they would say, but what do you need to hear from this person? And that again, it just really adds to the thinking about, what they need and how life would be different if they were hearing those things. So I find when I came home from Vietnam 20 years later, I wrote a small book called Welcome Home, where I was trying to find peace in myself because the welcome home wasn't that great. And that book made such a difference in my life because it gave me the peace that I was looking for. And I think anyone, when they begin to write, they think of something in writing where it takes a while to get it down. And the more time we spend on that, the more thoughts come back from the past that have influenced us. And it's digging up those old bones sometimes that really makes a difference.
Well, and I smile. My son number two called me one day and he says, Dad, he says, you know what? We don't know a lot about your life.
Mm-hmm.
He says, but how about he found an app of some sort that has the children ask their parents questions and then ask you to kind of do a video on each question a little bit at a time. And we've started that. I haven't gone very far with it. But what I find fascinating about that is that I believe that there are actual apps out there that if you're trying to do this and you're not real good at it, you can use something that asks you a question, you can write it down, ask you another question. And I think if you get a good one, it starts to really help you to delve, as you say, into that life experience and what's been going on so that you're able to write it down. And it makes a big difference.
It does. So much of who we are evaporates. And it's fascinating for kids to know. There's so much about my mom and dad that I didn't know. They had quite a history, and it would be very fascinating to have written down, their travels, their hardships, and I know they both had them because back in their days they went through the Depression.
Yeah.
They went through World War II, which was horrible, and but to know what they went through would be a gold mine.
Amen.
And
how do people find you, Jerry?
My website is jerrydclark.com, jerrydclark.com. And on the website, it has the social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, let's see, YouTube and Facebook are all three there. So anyone can get in touch with me in any of those social medias by going to my webpage, jerrydclark.com.
Okay, and how do they find your book, Blind Spots?
It's in all the major bookstores, and it's also on Amazon.
Great, great. So as we close, Jerry, what would be a final message that you'd like to share with the audience?
I like the idea that life is beautiful and it can be beautiful. And sometimes we produce a lot of wreckage that we're totally unaware of. The magic of that to me is feedback, and to be able to hear feedback and make the kind of changes that cause people to gravitate toward you as opposed to be repelled by you. And we all know so many instances where that happens, where people just don't connect with others, and it's hard for them to hear feedback. For me to hear anything negative about myself was awful, but now I welcome feedback, whatever anyone can tell me. And I don't adhere to everything someone says that I need to make a change. But if there's any kind of pattern, by all means, I want to look at that and see what I can do to call it build a better me so I can have a better life.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Jerry, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been wonderful. And what I love is the fact that I just love people that are making a difference in other people's lives. And they do that in different ways. But here you made a major change in your life and are now helping people in such a wonderful way. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doug, and I appreciate what you're doing because it's the same thing.
Well, I appreciate that. Folks, thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we look forward to having you join again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.